So, Greg, you operate in the education space. Tell us a bit about how the idea came about, how the business evolved.
Well, as a high school language student in about 2004, I was studying French and Japanese, and every student had to learn about 1,500 words in each of those languages. The biggest challenge was that the way you test yourself is often quite ineffective, and also that you can't hear the native speaker pronunciation of words. So over a few weekends I built a basic prototype really for my own use. I never had any idea it would turn into the commercial success that it is today. And when I got to university, I started to go and give presentations to schools, and I thought, well, if it was so useful for my friends and myself, maybe it could be a product that we could actually, sell. And from my perspective, I thought, while I'm studying business, let's see if I can apply these concepts that I'm taught in class. And it was interesting that the first 18 months that I showed it to literally dozens and dozens and dozens of teachers, not a single person was even interested in looking at it.
So you really had to fight to even try and get in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't, at the time, understand why they were so hesitant. It's interesting to think that a lot has changed with online learning. Back in 2004, not that many people were even thinking in those sort of terms. And so I think a lot of things have changed. We've got much better presenting the same idea, essentially what people turned down, a number of years ago. Almost all of those people are using the system today. More than sort of 80% of high schools in New Zealand are using Language Perfect, and about 300,000 people around the world. We've got better at presenting the system. The market's obviously turned, and essentially the way the education industry works is one happy customer talks to the next.
Yeah. So word of mouth is important. Just before we sort of have a look at the business, how did you deal with the issue of rejection all the time? And how much did you feel that your age perhaps was part of that?
Well, I think that was probably the major thing that teachers were thought, well, what could an 18-year-old have that we don't know ourselves? Yeah. And I remember that the first time I presented Language Perfect, there were maybe 80 teachers in Auckland, and about 5 minutes into the presentation, one of the teachers stood up and he said, "This is rubbish." Like, imagine this. This is the first time you're like 18, you're talking to the teachers. He said it's rubbish, and he was from one of the very sort of prestigious schools, and people sort of went to him for quite an influencer.
So he was the opinion leader.
Yeah, one of the opinion leaders. And to be honest, I look back and I think it was a bit of a it actually wasn't really that polite. He didn't actually need to say that. He could have just not chosen to use the system, but he said it's rubbish in front of everyone. He said you're 10 years behind. No one learns words in isolation, and this is going nowhere. You should give up now. And he walked out of the talk.
How did you appear? So you're 18, you're probably fairly nervous at this stage, giving a presentation in front of 80 people, and your key opinion leader walks out.
Well, it went down to the simple fact that I knew it had been useful for myself. And I just thought, well, here these teachers are. It's fair enough they can't see the value because they've, I think Steve Jobs said that he doesn't ask the market what product they want. He decides on, what he thinks they'll need, and then he shows it to them. And I just knew they hadn't tried it yet. And so that was actually the most difficult thing, was just to get people to try it. And that's when we started running competitions, and instead of calling it a free trial, you call it a competition, which is effectively the same thing, but all of a sudden people perceive it differently. And once they'd used it for a few hours, then they saw the value and they ended up buying it in the following years.
It must have felt, though, a pretty lonely experience where you're getting rejection after rejection. I mean, how did you cope with that?
I saw it as a learning opportunity. I suppose there's lots of different forms of no. Mm-hmm. Having spoken to hundreds and hundreds of teachers, some no's are most no's with schools are actually, I'm too busy to do something right now, come back to me later, as opposed to a no meaning I will never use your product. And you've got to be able to differentiate and identify exactly what the no means. And at the end of the day, by realizing these teachers were just too busy to look at it now, it wasn't that they didn't want to do it, and by persisting with them over literally over a 3-year period. You know, it was 18 months before we made our first sale, and in the following 18 months, you suddenly hit that tipping point, and the entire market surges with it. That's, I suppose I could see every presentation I did, I got a little bit better. You get a little bit further before they say no, and instead of me walking out the room with them almost throwing stuff to get me out, they at least gave me a smile. You know, I suppose you could see the improvement until the point at which you start making sales, and then everything sort of, you know, exponentially skyrockets from there.
What about validating the other side of the market, which was with students themselves? Yeah. How did you go about that side of the process?
Well, that was much easier. I was literally sitting in my university dorm, you know, and I'd spend my evenings for months, and I'd get, because there were 200 students in my hall of residence, and probably 100 of them, I ended up roping them into sitting at my computer, and I'd sit behind them, and the rule was I wasn't allowed to say anything to them, because I knew someone had to be able to go through the website without any instruction. And it's amazingly difficult to get someone to click on the buttons you want them to click on. And I'd sit there, I'd watch them, and they'd get stuck on a page, and I'd stay up until 2 in the morning, and I'd make the button like bigger and bigger and bigger, and make it flashing until eventually they could push the start test button without getting lost. And that literally took months. It's crazy how the tiniest detail, if you think, oh, someone says they didn't use it, you've got to find out, oh, that's because they got lost on the screen. You've got to find that screen, improve it until, you know, 8 out of 10 people that used it were able to get into a test, finish a test, and say that was really good. And at that point in time, I was like, we're good enough. Now let's get schools on it.
So you were actually not only trying to run the business, but you're actually doing all the back-end software as well.
Yeah, well, at the start, I did. Obviously, I designed it at school. It got to a point where I got my brother Shane, who is studying medicine. He's much better with more advanced coding techniques, and so he started designing all the backend and the database, and I stayed doing the website design and the front end interface, and got people to help me do the sound recording and everything. But it certainly was an experience where I was involved in every element, and that was the fun part.
And the business has grown, and you're now across a number of different schools. You're both here and in Australia, so you've taken a fairly global perspective right from an early stage.
Yeah, and we've got schools using the system. We've got about 30,000 students in the United Kingdom, a large chunk of our users in Australia, a couple of schools in America, and the majority of schools in New Zealand at this point in time. And next on the radar is Asia.
And you've changed the name of the business because it was originally, you know, focuses on language, but now you're looking for a much more holistic model. Why the decision to broaden the scope?
Well, with the shift towards online learning, we had a lot of schools, particularly in Australia, that came to us and said, well, there's this new Australian curriculum where our students have all got laptops now. The publishers are coming to us with online textbooks, which don't really make the most of what computers can achieve. And actually the most successful tool we've got is Language Perfect. So if you could just build something really excellent for science and maths and English and history, we would use it, and so that's what we've done, and that's what's happened.
And how does the business model work itself, Craig? How do you charge for it?
So the annual subscriptions to Language Perfect are about $30 per student per year, and other subjects will be around $40 per student per year.
So that's pretty reasonable. So you're effectively paying $3 a student a month or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And schools just put it on the book list along, you know, instead of getting a workbook, they'd get our system.
So within schools, is it an optional system, or is it everybody opts in?
Well, it's most successful when a teacher can actually assign homework online, and instead of having to mark it themselves, the students do it in their own time in a very sort of gamified way. They get scores, compete with friends, and teachers get a report to see not only who's done the homework but which elements they struggled with. So teachers have got a lot to benefit from the system as well, and that only works when it's compulsory across a school.
Right. So how do you compete with the likes of Khan Academy and so forth, who are offering a free model?
Yep. Well, we differentiate our system with having really customized content to a specific curriculum. So following the exact NCA curriculum, modeling previous exams, having the actual vocabulary students need to know here in New Zealand is completely different from a generalized presentation. We also run global events, we make it fun with prizes and certificates. There's a very, very sort of gamified feel about the website as well, with a lot of points. And you add to that the really critical element of top-notch service and customization for schools. So whatever a teacher needs, we're going to give them, like every single school has a different curriculum that they follow, and we model our system to follow what they need.
Wow. So it's actually bespoke to a certain extent as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So when you look at this debate around online learning, because there's plenty of debate, really, isn't it, between people who embrace it and see the future and others who are much more traditionally focused. How do you work with that, and how do you listen to the voices of students and so forth, the end users, in terms of reflecting that in the product?
Well, I think that students want to be able to learn at their own pace. They want to be able to extend themselves, go backwards. They want to be able to try subjects. And the most important element of on learning, I think, is that it's very non-threatening. And as a language learner in the classroom, the most embarrassing thing is if a teacher says, what does this word mean? You don't want to call that in front of the whole class and get it wrong, and everyone giggles that you... And it's interesting that that one element that you could sit at home and it says, what does this mean? And you can do it. And if you get it wrong, there's no penalty at all in online learning and making mistakes, which encourages you to try things. And I think there's a lot of merit in students being able to solidify key learning components in that environment. And the classroom environment should be about sort of applying those concepts. Once you know vocabulary, use the class time to actually have conversations with your teacher, which makes the best use of their skill set and the classroom time with students as well.
Now, you've taken a very innovative, creative approach to this, and you've spotted an opportunity, and you actually dropped out of a university.
Yes.
You kind of followed the Steve Jobs and others before you who have gone on to create a business. How did you find your time at university actually prepared you for your time as an entrepreneur? Well,
I think there was a lot of really useful information that's taught in a university environment. Having said that, I think it's a very sort of PC environment where the goal is to get everyone to pass. And the reality, like the harsh reality in a commercial environment, is that in each industry, 1 or 2 businesses are going to succeed, and maybe 3 if it's a big industry, and everyone else is not. They're literally going to go to business. It's actually quite ruthless. And I think that if a business course wants to prepare for students for the real world, it needs to be really intense. That's I did a sales paper where all you had to do was sell a bag of firewood for $20 and you could get an A+. And when I actually extended and I went and tried to get sponsorship and create a brand around the sales assignment, I actually went and raised a few $1,000s. I was actually penalised for getting sidetracked from the course, and that was the day that I left. I actually went and handed my resignation and said, well, I really can't see how, if this is the sales course, that this isn't selling, this isn't brand or value creation, because that's what business is about, is taking simple things and creating additional value by how it's perceived.
What have you learned the most? And you're only 24, so this has been a very fast trajectory growth for you. What have you learned along the way in the short time that you have been able to call yourself an entrepreneur?
Well, the one absolute certainty is that when you're fishing, you've never caught a fish without a hook in the water, right? And that applies to to getting in any business, to getting customers on board. It's literally a daily activity. I probably spend 70 to 80% of my time at least out there talking to customers and finding out what they're after. How can we make it better? How can we make it better? If someone says they're not interested, I don't walk out, I'm like, why aren't you interested? Like, how can we, what is it that you use at the moment that makes this better? Is it just that you don't want to change? Because I'm not going to take that as an answer. You can't be lazy with me now. You've got to be open to new ideas. Yeah. And if it is better, tell me why it's better. Yeah. And I'm going to make our product better than that. And then you go away and talk to the developers and you say, right, here's X, Y, and Z. We need it by Monday. And then you go back to the teacher and you're like, so we've done it. And they're like, checkmate, you've got me. It's a long. You've got to have a long line.
You don't take no for an answer easily.
I don't take no for an answer.
Yeah. When you're looking at all of the opportunities that exist in the space, are you looking at a lot of possibilities in the future as to where you could take this? Because this whole, online learning is really still in its infancy, isn't it?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity with, giving people skills for various careers. I really imagine a world where a student in year 9 could be learning content from year 12 or year 13 and getting accredited for it officially, and potentially even extending themselves commonly to doing university courses across the range that receive credit. I know Khan Academy is looking towards that sort of thing, and we would be as well.
So effectively, you're getting more and more into this space where students can teach themselves in a supported way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you look at, I guess, everything you've learnt and everything that you're looking to achieve in the future, what have been the biggest obstacles along the way? You talked about some of the persistence issues and the need to sort of stick to the vision, but what have been some of those other challenges that might have tipped you off the other side?
Yeah, well, I suppose I've been very fortunate with the support that I've had around me, but it's, I think for anyone that's 18 and looking at starting a business, I'll give you the honest answer, and that is, there was, for every bit of support that I had, there were 50 people telling me that it wouldn't work.
Right.
And so the general overwhelming, the most difficult thing with our business was getting to that first $100,000 mark. Mm-hmm. Right. Once you're there, it's simply a case of incrementally growing the business, and until you're selling millions. Mm-hmm. But that first bit was when I'd say probably once a week something would come up, somebody would say something, students in my dorm would be a language student, they'd say, I'm a language student, I would never use that, teachers would say that. And I suppose if you believe in the product, that's a good start. And for me, what kept me going was I also believed in how important it was to work towards financial independence at a young age, when you could take risks, and that it didn't even matter if it didn't work. This was the only time I was really going to have my best shot at making it work. And I started it with no skills, no knowledge, no funds. We've never taken on any investment or any backing. And I'm actually really proud that we've managed to make it work. It's really, the product's great, but there's nothing special about that market opportunity. We just didn't take no for an answer, and we didn't stop.
So in the language of entrepreneurs, you've bootstrapped all the way through.
Absolutely.
What about recruitment, getting staff to work for you? What do you look for in terms of staff? And when you're hiring at a relatively young age, are you hiring young people, or what's your approach in the recruitment space?
Yeah, well, there's quite a mix in our team, but the common thread, and I'll chuck it out there, that we are hiring right now, and the biggest limiting factor for us is finding another 25 ultra enthusiastic, ambitious, talented people. And the common thread is that the skill set people had when they joined the team was actually quite relevant. And if people have got the right attitude, within 6 months you can be up and going and be doing exceptionally well. And what we're looking for people is people that are really flexible, that see their role as doing anything that it takes to make something success, people that really believe that education can have a positive impact. And just, we've got an incredible lady, Tanya, that was, used to be a teacher in Western Australia, that now manages all of our partnerships with teachers associations and conferences. And a lot of our team are quite young university students. Mm-hmm. But there's no limitation to join the team in terms of qualification or previous experience. So
it's the dynamic factor of the person you're looking at.
Absolutely. So, like, people that see the world as being, if you had a glass of water, as being half full rather than half empty.
Yeah. And finally, Craig, have you set yourself a big goal, a big ambitious goal, an audacious goal for the future?
Well, that's a really interesting question. It sounds a bit corny, but I wrote down on a bit of paper a few years ago to set out to unite the world through education, and it is actually quite a nice thing to think about. that what we're doing is much more than a commercial enterprise, but actually a way of empowering and motivating and inspiring people, and that's why I'm here today.
You're a weightless business, so it can all be done from New Zealand.
Absolutely. I could imagine us having 250 staff right here in New Zealand, managing a global business from around the world.